Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to CHLP's second webinar on aging with HIV. I am Dee Connor, CHLP's aging consultant, and I am so excited to be here with you guys today. So, aging with HIV is a journey that looks different for every person. Some of the differences in the impact that living with HIV has on one's journey depends on when they acquired HIV, right? And so we're fortunate to have an incredible panel of experts with us today. We have Kim Kennedy, Tez Anderson, and Dr. Joyce Keller Turner. Together, we'll explore the unique challenges and experiences faced by those aging with HIV and how these experiences differ depending on when they acquired HIV. And so, after a brief groundbreaking introduction, I will ask our panelists a few questions to explore the similarities and the differences between their experiences. And at the end of the moderated portion, we will open it up for questions, okay? And with that being said, please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along. And so, first of all, I just want to make sure, to ground us here today. So, we have some shared understanding and vocabulary as we move forward with this webinar. And the phrase HIV, aging with HIV, sometimes means, different things to a lot of different people. A portion of that community are people who are known as long-term survivors. Long-term survivors are people who acquired HIV before 1996, meaning during a time when we know at least we knew the least about HIV, and before the discovery of long-term treatments through antiviral treatment therapy. Another is that community is of lifetime survivors or dandelions. Lifetime survivors are people who acquired HIV at birth as young children. Okay. The name dandelions came from a poem written by the wonderful Mary Bowman, who sadly passed away in 2019. There are also people with HIV who acquired HIV during their later adulthood after the age of 50 rather than during their youth, okay? They are too aging with HIV, just like everyone else who is aging with HIV. And the percentage of that portion makes up a large amount of new diagnosis. Disturbingly, a large number of those diagnosed with HIV after age 50 are receiving dual diagnoses, meaning they are diagnosed with AIDS either at the time of their initial diagnosis of HIV or shortly thereafter. So now we don't have time to do long introductions this time for each panelist that fully encompass their skills and positions. But, so I'm going to do the introductions briefly. And so now let's see, we have Joyce Keller Turner. Beautiful Joyce Keller Turner, 74 years old. And she is thriving wonderfully with HIV. She resides in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She is the founder and CEO of Aspirations, a nonprofit service organization, an artist, an advocate, community organizer, motivational speaker, writer, actress, producer, and she's a director. She is also the mind behind Positive Diva on Instagram. And next we have Kimberly Kennedy, is a proud dandelion from Brooklyn, New York, who has been speaking out and fighting for her dandelions community for years, blogging at A Girl Like Me through the Will Project. She is a sexuality educator, and a pleasure activist. Okay, Kim. Long term campaign ambassador for the NYC Department of Health, and has served as a reproductive health educator with Red Hook Initiative. In her campus, she does in her spare time, she works as a substitute teacher in New York public system. Good. Okay, Kim. And now we have Tez Anderson, who is currently in California. Tez is an award-winning, nationally recognized HIV long-term survivor, writer, speaker, who focuses on HIV long-term survivors and aging. Did you know Tez has been living with HIV since 1982? He is the founder of Let's Kick Ass, AIDS Survivor Syndrome. The first, now listen to what I just said, largest group in the world focused on improving the lives of HIV long term survivors and the older adults aging with HIV. And now we're going to get started with our questions. So, each of you identifies as aging with HIV, right? Although you required HIV at different points in your life, discussions around HIV and aging are happening more frequently. One could even say, looking at these media examples, that the topic is having a moment. I think it's having a moment. Mm-hmm. Could the three of you share what you think is missing from the current discussion happening around HIV and aging? And Tez, we're gonna go with you first.
Okay. Hi guys, welcome. I yes, it's in the zeitgeist. It's in the atmosphere. People are talking about it finally. I mean, I started Let's Kick Ass 13 years ago now, and no one was talking about it then. Um, I think the thing that we often miss is because we're all trying to be so positive and uplifting and whatnot. It's just how damn hard it is to be a long-term survivor because I sort of converted in 1983, and at the time I was told I had less than 2 years to live, and what that does to your head when you're a young person. I was 26 or 25, 23 at the time, but what that does to your head is put you on a sort of slow march to death because they say you're going to be dead within 2 years. That's hard for a young person to take mentally and emotionally, and to kind of wrap your head around. And it took a few crying jags and some therapy and some pills to calm me down, and made me learn to accept the idea that I was dying. For me, a bigger crisis happened much later on, when I realized, oh, damn, I'm going to be an old man with AIDS. That was the one thing I had not planned for. I don't have a retirement savings account. I don't have 401ks, whatever they are. So the idea of aging with this virus that was supposed to have killed me threw everything up into the air. I kind of lost my way. We'll call it a nervous breakdown to be polite. It was just a rough time for me, and it was so unexpected. I had prepared for the other stuff, the dying and all that stuff, but I hadn't planned the idea of what I'm going to do when I'm 65 now. What am I going to do at this age? So after a lot of poking around with therapists who didn't know how to deal with me, who didn't understand my experience and had no real background in this experience, I realized I know as much as they do, and I began teaching them about what it means to live with a life of trauma. Really, it's about trauma. How can I leave it there because I don't want to go over, but that's it.
Thank you, Tez. Thank you. Kim?
Um, so I guess for me, it's similar to Taz, but a little different because this is all I know. All I know is HIV. And growing up, growing up in 80, well, I was born in 86 and growing up in the 90s, HIV at that time, we didn't have all that information that we have now. The medication was non existent. And then being a child growing up with it and knowing, because that's what we were constantly told is be happy that you're alive, be happy, enjoy the moments that you have, because I was told that I wasn't going to make it to my first birthday. So even making it to age 5, every day was a celebration. Making it to age 10, it was the hope came, but still that apprehension of trying to understand what's even happening to my body, what's going on, what could happen in the rest of the world. Because even though there was hope, on one part, the other part was I'm living a life that I never prepared for, not understanding that, you know, everybody always says there's something greater later on, for me, like I'm here for a reason. But for a really long time, I didn't understand what that reason was. And, I felt like nobody else understood what it was to grow up living with HIV, our whole life and what to do. Like, how do you breathe? So even being considered somebody who was growing and living with HIV, and I'm almost 40, it still baffles me every day. I
Right.
have my friends, I have my support, but that's something that is, I think, trying to figure out what do we do now? We made it to our 20s and some of us to our 30s, and a lot of us were scared to have children, get married, be in relationships, because it was that what if factor. So I think that's how it kind of was for a really long time growing up living with HIV.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Joyce.
Okay. Well, for me, I was an older adult, shall we say. I was diagnosed positive at the age of 52. I had retired as a flight attendant. I was a full time student at Southern University and had my first art exhibition. And I had just run from this Bayou Classic at Southern University, made the news in my bathing suit, and life was good. Um, got into a car accident and found out that I was going to be living with HIV after a period of time when I ended up with an infection in my leg, and uh, it escalated to where I had to have treatment for the injury. And for me, I guess I wasn't devastated. I knew that things were changing with my body. At first, I thought it was menopause, and it wasn't. And when I was given the diagnosis of HIV, I was able to breathe a sigh of relief. I know that doesn't make sense to some people, but given my faith foundation, it was almost as if I needed to know what was happening with my body. I knew I was older. I thought I was tired. I was working, rearing my grandkids, full time student at Southern University. Like I said, life was good. Um, and then all of a sudden, I received a diagnosis that my life had changed. And some would say in a bad way, but for me, it was a good way because having been in the ministry most of my life and I was talking, trying to save souls, and I realized how disconnected I was from my community because I didn't believe HIV had anything to do with me. And once I received the diagnosis of living with HIV, I began to apologize because then I realized that I was so disconnected, and now I do have a purpose. When people didn't want to hear me preach, when they found out I was a woman living with HIV, doors began to open. Everybody wanted to know what HIV looked like. And God gave me the forum and the foresight and the strength to get out and let everybody know that HIV looked just like everybody in the church. So HIV did not devastate me, but propelled me to another level to where I became a global advocate to implement change the stigma, address the alienation and rejection that many of us faced. But I was blessed to have a family that embraced me and now a community that encourages me. So, me, the aging, I'll be 75 years old on tomorrow. And to have so many people prepared to come and celebrate with me, to embrace me and love me, has made all the difference in the world. And I will say to anybody out there who feels discouraged, HIV is something that I'm thriving with. And I'm able to teach other men and women, girls and boys, how to live well with HIV, to love yourself and know that you're worthy. And the HIV has been one of the best gifts that I've gotten, despite the negativity and everything that's attached to it. It has really given me my sense of purpose. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And so you see the differences. There's a difference with everyone who is aging with HIV. I mean, Kim talked about that's all she knows, you know? She's a lifetime survivor. And every day was a celebration for her when she was growing up.
Mhm,
Dennis talked about 2 years, they're telling him that he had to live.
mhm.
And that dealing with that trauma, some people just can't imagine what goes through someone when they're telling you that you may not make it, but he's still here. And so you just like with Tim and Kim and Tess, they never expected it. And you look up and you guys are still here thriving. And Joyce, she said she was devastated, but it
I was-
taught her that that she wasn't devastated, but it showed her that she needed to connect with her community. And it allowed her to know that that was her purpose. And so there's a lot of differences between everyone aging with HIV. We all deal with things differently, right? We're going to go ahead and go on to the next question. And are you aware, an entire section of the primer, CHLP's primer, is dedicated to the federal protection for people living with HIV? However, stigma, discrimination against people living with HIV are still an endemic in our society.
Yes.
So please share with us not only some ways that discrimination has showed up in your lives, but also any advice for others you have for combating stigma and discrimination. And Kim, we're going to go with you first.
So I guess I'll start with the tips. Okay. I always tell people know your rights. Okay, know your rights in your state. My state is New York. It's very liberal. We don't have any HIV criminalization laws in New York, but I still have to know if I'm traveling, and I travel a lot. What's going on in Florida? What's going on in Georgia? So that way I know what I'm walking into when I go into different states. What is permitted? What does it look like? What does the atmosphere and the climate looks like in these different places? Um, and not getting discouraged. I think for me, I had I've experienced stigma and discrimination in different ways, whether that is through my father's side of the family, blaming me, the child, for my father's death. And, being a child and trying to understand what that means. I still don't know what that means. I'm the product that killed my father, which is what my grandmother on my father said. And I was about 15, and I didn't, and trying to process that, trying to process my status, trying to figure out, do I want to be open and public? And that put something else on me as well, deciding to be public. Being a teenager who's popular, I felt like I lived two different lives. I had Hood Kim, who was running around in the projects, who had to be one person. But then on the weekends, literally on the weekends, I was the advocate, the activist who was going to Albany saying these are our rights, marching along, going to conferences, presenting, being that mother figure to my friends, because I was the one that was ready to be out and open and talk about it at such a young age. And having to deal with doctors not wanting to see me, not wanting to talk to me, not wanting to touch me. And even then, now, like, my son is about to be 15, and I remember just being pregnant and having to navigate that space with people trying to tell me that why would I choose to give birth to a baby when that was the way that I contracted HIV? And the guilt that I felt every single day being pregnant. And that should have been one of the happiest times of my life. And it was coupled with me getting married. And it was something that I had to process and know, no, I know the facts. I know what the science says. I know what my body is doing. I had to understand that. I had to understand what my rights were, just even in New York, like for patient care rights, and having to fight back and having to report, because I'm real good to write an email and a letter and report somebody, because what you're not going to do is talk to me and treat me like I'm not an actual patient or a client, or I'm not a person. So that was something that, growing up with, I had really good support with from my sisters who told me, don't accept less, because there are going to be people who's going to treat you less than what they think that you deserve. So for me, I always, looked at myself in a higher space, because I knew that I was worth more than what the people was going to treat me as. So understand your worth, know your worth, believe that. And when you start believing that and you start looking at what's going on, I swear you vibrate on a higher plane, a higher path, where you don't let anybody treat you in any kind of way, and you will talk back. You will fight for your rights. So that's my advice and a little bit of my experience.
Thank you. I love that. Understanding your worth. We all have to understand our worth. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And Tez, you can go ahead and answer the question.
I have a different experience, I suppose, because I have lived in San Francisco almost the entire time I've had HIV. I actually tested positive when I moved to San Francisco. I realized later that I'd seroconverted 3 years earlier. So as far as frog in my throat, as far as feeling and being discriminated against or even stigma, I've had very little of it. I mean, it probably comes from ACT UP training in the old days, having that community and being a part of a community in San Francisco, which is very HIV, heavy, and dealing with all those losses together made us a strong community for a long time. Um, I mean, I had the thing with the dentist being freaked out a little bit once, but that was back in the '90s when we didn't. I moved here because I was in love, and I wasn't sure if sharing a toothbrush with my boyfriend would give him HIV or not because he was negative. Um, in those ways, but I very early on, I was public about my HIV status. So there was no running away from it for me. There was no, I mean, I didn't see any shame in having it. And I think that one of the things that I have tried to convey, and maybe it's my white privilege coming through that I can say it this way. So take that into consideration. But I think in order for us to feel stigmatized, we have to accept it. I mean, we have, on some level, we have to say, oh, I feel what you're telling me that I should feel. For me, I'm such a pain in the ass or a rebel or whatever you want to call it, that I'm like, you believe what you want to believe, but I don't believe that. It didn't affect me. It's a sort of old sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will not harm me. I've never been that sensitive. Um, so I think that by rejecting other people's versions of what I was going through and knowing within myself what my purpose was, because it was built in, because I was a gay rights activist in Atlanta, Georgia, before I was an LGBT, before I was an AIDS activist. Um, so I think I just kind of I was setting my own definitions, and it's in high school when I was going to my sophomore year, or before that I had braces and glasses and felt very insecure and very shy. And I decided that summer to go back to school a different person. I got contact lenses, my braces came off, and I felt like I was gay and knew I was gay. And I thought, if I'm going to go back and have this good 2 years of school, I got to go out and be someone else. I got to put on this, become another person to get through it. And for the last 2 years, I was popular and had friends, and it was a great experience. It was my first time of realizing I can choose my identity and I can choose how I present myself to the world. And so I've always presented myself as an HIV positive person living with HIV, even though I often felt like I was dying with it. Um, that's been helpful for me, I think, to be able to own my own power and define myself the way I define myself, and I'll end there.
Thank you, Tez. Thank you so much. Yeah, choosing your identity. And you did that. You did that. Joyce, question for you next.
Yes. Well, for me, it was critical that I learned the laws in the state of Louisiana because, unlike many states, Louisiana does have a criminalization law. And recently, I was blessed to be a part of the HIV AIDS task. Well, blessed to be a member of the commission task force on HIV and AIDS around the criminalization of HIV. And sitting on that panel, I think being an older woman, I was expected to be quiet or a yes woman, and to sit there with legislators who were making the choices for my life, discussing
Right.
what rights I had or I did not have around intentional exposure. It was critical for me to use my voice to let them know that as an HIV positive woman living and thriving with HIV, that if I was to be criminalized or arrested because someone said that they had had sex with me and I had no way to prove that I had disclosed, that was a hot topic. And I knew then that my voice had to be heard, and I had to make an impactful statement to let them know that as the matriarch of my family, as a leader in the church, as a community leader, as a global advocate, if I am to be arrested and criminalized for living with HIV because I know my status, what is the impact on the HIV community or my community? How many other people are going to get tested and know their status if they know that they can be criminalized? So the question became, what is intentional exposure? And then I realized that one of the statutes on the book was that if I was to have a conversation with someone about having a date, going out to dinner or whatever, and even if there was no sexual contact, and that person went out with me, and the question of intimacy came up, I could be arrested for intentional exposure because I didn't tell that person that I'm living with HIV. For me, language means everything. So we're still fighting to get some of the language changed. Let me be clear on that. But it is important, like Kim said, to know what the laws are in the state of Louisiana, because New York's laws are different from ours. But to live in a state where I am criminalized for living positive, not committing any crime, and my crime is being an HIV positive woman. So I can hear somebody, don't know, I can hear the mind spinning. She's in the ministry. How did she get it? What difference does it make? I'm just putting that out there because I can feel what I feel. I can see what I see.
It doesn't
So
make a difference.
it doesn't matter how I got it. I still live how I acquired it. I deal with the same issues that anybody else does living with HIV. Um, when you know the law, you try to teach other people the law. And after being diagnosed positive, Hillary Clinton brought me to Washington, D.C. when she was a senator to speak at a congressional breakfast. And at the time, we had what was called NIR, no identifiable risk. And I was able to give my testimony and let them know that rape was an identifiable risk. You can check with the CDC or anybody you want, type my name in. Let's see where my focus has been and the difference that my voice is made within the voice in the space of HIV. So for me, knowing the law, applying the law, and fighting to change those laws has made a difference for me. But it's not about me. I know my rights. My voice must stay relevant and loud for those that don't know their rights, and those who are silent, and those that some people deem invisible. Then I must be the voice of those. Therefore, I must share the law with you in any forum that I can. And Kim, I applaud you. The other gentleman, I applaud you. And D, I applaud you for holding such a forum so that we can share our experiences and encourage somebody else. You don't have to do what we do. If you have to be a silent storm, do it from behind the scenes. Because it's survival. Everybody is not in a space where they can be as vocal as I am, and I understand that. But if I can lend my voice to your fight, just let me know, because
Thank
I'll
you.
stand behind you, with you, and in front. Thank you, D.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, we always say that, don't we? We're
Yeah,
using our voices for those who can't speak for themselves.
yeah,
And that's why a lot of people advocate.
yeah.
You know, they're in this fight to speak for other people who can't speak for themselves. But we talked about here discrimination from family, from Kim.
Mhm,
Um, we talked about what's permitted in different states,
mhm.
even the criminalization laws. Using your voice, be strong and speak up and use your voice, you know, so people can hear you. um just being public, Tez talked about early with his status, and he never felt stigmatized against, you know, and because he rejected what other people were
Mhm,
saying.
mhm.
So Tez, you know, you're right. It depends on how you view
Mhm.
yourself instead of allowing yourself to view how other people view you. Um, Everybody here who is on watching, please remember if you have questions to drop them in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. And also, if you have not downloaded CHLP's wonderful legal primer for people aging with HIV, the link is right here in the chat to download right now. We're going to go on to question number 3. One of the topics that are raised in conversation again and again in reference to people aging with HIV is their complex healthcare needs. Okay. In your experience, how well do you think the needs of those aging with HIV are being addressed by the current healthcare system? And what gaps do you see? And what changes do you believe are necessary to better support people aging with HIV? And Tez, you can go ahead and answer that question for us first.
I mean, for a long time, I was experiencing things like neuropathy because I was on the trials with the D drugs back in the 80s, early 90s. Um, the D drugs were a mess. Then they started this process of slowly numbing and causing a
Mhm.
kind of weird pain and numbness in my feet. Um, and I sort of thought that just went along with having HIV, you know, that I had to learn to live with the pain and the inability to stand for a long time. And as I got older, it got much worse. And I was talking to my psychiatrist one day, the guy that prescribed my HIV, my antidepressants at the time. And I said, how are you doing? And I said, well, I kind of want to kill myself because I just came back from the International AIDS Conference and it was miserable. My feet were hurting the entire time. And he said, well, there's an antidepressant that's been shown to have signs of, you know, has efficacy against neuropathy. And I was skeptical of it because I just, you know, antidepressants are antidepressants. And so I reluctantly I tried them, and within 2 weeks, my pain started going away, and my numbness didn't. I didn't feel my feet as badly, and within a month, it was gone. My life had changed, and that was because I didn't ask for the longest time. I mean, I tried the various variations of the drugs that they had available for it, but they didn't do anything for me. Um, And that was the other thing that I realized is that for a lot of me, I react differently than other people do to drugs. You know, my reactions and my symptoms are often different. But it was the ability to say, my life is not where it's not worth living because I can't walk the distances. I can't stand in a group for very long. And I did it and I smiled through it. But I would go back to the room at the end of the day and my feet would just throb and I would just lay in bed the rest of the night. So really for me, a lot of it's about asking, um, not just assuming that what you have going on is something that you have to live with because I've had HIV for so many years. Um, and, and trying for me, all the medications I take about improving my quality of life. And when they interfere with my quality of life, like antidepressants do sometimes, because they numb you out, um, you, you have to kind of be aggressive and ask for better treatments. You know, what's more
Mhm.
available. If nothing is, and nothing is. But finding the right person, the right doctor, because one doctor may not even know about this medication and that I'm taking now that has changed my life. Um, I almost forgotten the question. I've been rattling on so long, but basically that was it. It's just that don't accept anything as oh this is just comes with aging. Um, dig into it
Yeah.
and stay mobile. The biggest advice I have for anybody is to stay active as long as you can. I mean, because I'm in physical therapy for my feet right now because I've spent such a long time walking like a duck, pronated they call it. But I'm learning to walk again and stand up and sit down and do exercises, and it's helped my mental state and it's helped my physical state remarkably.
Great. That's great, Tez. I'm happy that's working out for you. I really am. And just to clarify, so you guys can know when I ask you to, but thank you so much, Tez, for answering. What gaps do you see, and what changes do you believe are necessary to support aging individuals with HIV? I guess within the current healthcare system, we're gonna go with Kim.
It didn't want to unmute. Okay, so I think the original question was are they adequate? Do you guys see it? For, I get mad every time I think about healthcare right now. I know I started off by saying that New York is very liberal when it comes to laws, but healthcare it's not as great as everybody think it is. Like compared
Mhm.
to other states, yes, we have came a long way. I love living in New York, but when it comes to my population, those who are born positive, they have dropped the ball. When it
Mhm.
comes to, we are literally, I'll speak for myself, 37 years old, 38 in a month, exactly a month. And the amount of things that I've seen going on with my friends, going on with me, I've had a stroke. I've had, besides, I'm going through many perimenopause right now at 37. Um, a lot of the things that for my mental health, thank you Jesus that I had a really good therapist who kind of disappeared, but I've been in therapy for so long that I already have the tools, so I know how to navigate. I'm not going, crazy right now, or I'm not going off. I'm not losing my mind, because I use those tools every day. But do I think that they are targeted or helpful to people like me? No, I don't think that they're taking us serious when it comes to a lot of us are experiencing the same things that people over 50 are experiencing, whether that is me with a stroke, my friend who had a heart attack, HIV, dementia. I had a friend who passed away, two of them who had HIV, dementia. And we're not talking about what that is. We're not talking about this can happen to us who are, I don't even think he was 30 when he passed away. And it's just a lot of things that the older population is experiencing, that we're experiencing too. Those screenings that they would say, oh, at age 40, we're going to screen you. No, that needs to happen at age 20, age
Right.
25. We need to change the guidelines. We need to change our mindset when it comes to what healthcare looks like in people who are not living with HIV, those who are aging with HIV, and those who are born positive with HIV. And then start merging that together. And I think also for us who are born positive, we see it every day. So it's one of those things that we kind of get used to, like, oh, that's just something that happens, and we need to speak up. So I think when it comes to the doctors, when it comes to us, we all need to change our mindset when it comes to what is adequate healthcare, what do I need, and then start actually trying to get things changed when it comes to intake forms, when it
Mhm.
comes to the screening process, and also when it comes to talking to each other, because a lot of the times we live in this bubble of shame and fear that we don't want to tell somebody else who's going through the same thing that we're going through, that we're going through something. So then we go into this isolation, feeling like we're all by ourselves when there's
Right.
somebody
Right.
else who's going through the same thing. But
Exactly.
because we're in our bubble, we're not talking about it. So we need to be more open to talk to each other, so that way we can actually talk to the people in the healthcare system and change policies and guidelines.
Mm, thank you. Thank you. I mean, Tess talked about the neuropathy and having a hard time standing, and the medication help with pain, um, and asking for what you need. Tess talked about asking for what you need. And I think a lot of people are afraid, there are doctors, they're there for us, but we have to use our voice to ask them or tell them what we need in order to get the help that we need. And just doing more, like Kim said, doing more for lifetime survivors because they are aging with HIV, and a lot of them are under 40 years old. So it's those comorbidities that come with aging that many of us develop. Joyce, do you want to go ahead and answer the question about the support that is necessary in the healthcare system for people aging with HIV?
Yes, one of the questions you asked, if I may go back to it, it was what's one of the common topics we hear every day. For me, I want to just bring this one up because people think that people who are older are not that we no longer know anything about sex or appreciate our sexuality. One of the questions, I mean, that was a doctor I was working with doing TV on a TV show, and she asked me bluntly, "Do you still have sex?" I said, "Of course, very often." She says, "Well, why would you?" I said, "Why wouldn't I?" So it's that kind of a thing. They think that, number one, because I'm an older woman, evidently I've taken everything and thrown it in the trash. Please don't nobody believe that. 74 for me, I'm the new 40. So just to put it out there. So um, that's one of the things we deal with. The ideology that because you're living with HIV, there's a gap when it comes to education about us being able to function normally. Please, just because I became HIV positive did not erase my sexuality or my sensuality. It didn't make me love myself any less. It made me love myself more. And for me, that's the gap. It's a gap in education, it's a gap in communication, it's a gap in us having these kind of webinars, Zoom meetings. It's a
Hmm.
gap in
Hmm.
I would say just us being able to express ourselves. There's a gap in acceptance. It's a gap in the realization that we're still human. And when you talk about healthcare, there's a gap in healthcare because even though I have insurance, my infectious disease doctor lives in Texas. So I'm not covered in Texas. When I go to the doctor, I have to pay out of pocket. So even though I have Medicaid and Medicare, it's only for the state of Louisiana. How dumb is that? Because some of your better doctors are not always in your state. Excuse me. and even some of the people who treat you better. And I work with a doctor who is a world-renowned HIV/AIDS researcher. So I'm getting the best treatment. And there's when you talk about a gap, there's a gap in the in us having information around clinical trials because we don't often get into clinical trials. I was a part of the GRACE study before Truvada was put on the market. I'm one of your guinea pigs. So we don't do enough clinical trials, and we're not given enough information or invitations to participate.
Mm.
And a large part of that, we have to go back to the Tuskegee study. A lot of people don't trust research because of what happened with the Tuskegee study. So we have to kind of try to bridge that gap between that and then and now. Uh, there's so much that we need to do, which is why it's critical that those of us who are on the forefront of this fight around HIV, there's a gap in what we do and who we have in the room. There's a gap between the city leaders, community leaders. There's a gap between organizations because we become clannish and we become territorial. We don't want to have the, don't want that, don't we don't want to share the wealth, share the knowledge because we're afraid if somebody knows what we know, then we got to get past that. There's a gap in that when it comes to healthcare. But I should be able to refer somebody to every organization in town. I'm supposed to know everything about everybody nationwide. If you can't get it with me, I'm supposed to be able. So there's a gap in that. There's a gap in us trusting each other. We need to build stronger relationships. Just because I provide this service over here, Dee can pick up the phone anytime and call me or send me an email and say, Dr. Joyce, I need you. I don't care who's on stage. I got you. I'm going to adjust my schedule because if she needs me, evidently I have something that I can offer to somebody. So we have got to get past the money thing, the funding. There's a gap in funding that affects what the service that we can provide. We talk about how we make. I said the other day, we're bridging a gap. We're doing a program where we're bridging the gap between the elder and the younger generation talking about sexual health. There's a gap there. There's a gap there. And in fact, I've called Dee and I said, look, I need some female condoms because I want women to take control of their sexual health. I'm not going to leave that in the hands of the man I'm sleeping with. And we
Right.
need to teach out. That's a gap in us telling young women that it's okay for them to have their own condoms. Why not? And I'm going to be very brash and say this because now we have girls who have cars. They pick up boys. And if they need to get them a little bit, they're going to buy gas. They ain't going to buy no condom. And if a boy need gas and he got a little car, he going to put gas in his car. He gonna put for gas, even though he still want to get some ass. Now I said that, so y'all can just call your pastors and pray for me. I'm good. But
Thank you. Thank you.
there's a we just got to bridge that gap and tell people we got to erase the shame attached to sex and let
Yeah.
them know it's all right to do that because that's some good stuff. I close on that note.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As you talked a lot about having sex over 50 and 60,
Yeah,
you're
we do
not
that.
dead. Your
Yeah.
bodies are still alive. You still got that feeling in your body. So
Hey, mercy, amen, amen. And then,
we're gonna go on to the fourth question. And I ask you guys again if you have any questions to put it in the chat and click that link down there in that chat and download CHLP's legal primer. We're gonna try to make these answers a little bit short because we don't have very much time and they may have questions that you guys have to answer. Okay. So now Joyce already did it, but let's talk about sex. Sex and sexuality
oh God.
have always been central to conversations about HIV.
Mhm.
Often surrounded in stigma and misconceptions. Those misconceptions. We shouldn't be having sex. Just go on in the corner and lay down somewhere and leave that alone. You don't need to
Mm.
be having sex anymore. And in the late 80s and early 90s, stereotypes and shame were directed at the gay community.
Mhm.
And the resulting fear led to laws that criminalize people living with HIV, you know, laws that remain in place for over 30 years today in states. For many who grew up during that time, these attitudes still shape their experiences today. Additionally, many doctors are hesitant. They're hesitant now to discuss sexual health with older patients, just like Joyce discussed, and contributing to the rising HIV rates of HIV among those who are 50 and older. So, especially as CDC testing recommendations end at what age? 64. So, has this lingering stigma and criminalization affected your life or choices? Or should I say sexual choices? What challenge or considerations do you face when it comes to living a sex positive life while aging with HIV? And what advice would you offer for those seeking to embrace pleasure and positivity in their sexual life? And Kim, as a sexual educator, could you please answer the question first?
Well, Dr. Joyce, you kind of went in, and I'm still stuck
Did
on
she?
get that
Did
gas and
she?
get some ass. I'm here for that because I'm
Yeah.
gonna do both. Best believe I'm gonna get that gas and I'm gonna get a little bit too. But
Mm,
for me, I'm blessed that um I've been with my husband for feels like an eternity for 21 years. So we've been together for this long. We've been married for 15. But that doesn't mean that like sex has stopped. One, people think you get married, sex has stopped. You get older, sex has stopped, and that's not even the case, right? Like let's just take my HIV out of the equation for a minute, right? You know, you're with somebody and you want to experiment, you want to do more. You know that me living with HIV is not the factor of if I want to go and bust it wide open. Like I'm not gonna. My HIV is not stopping it with me. I think for me it was more so if I'm public with my status. I have people who see my face everywhere. So if we wanted to do something like have a threesome and be experimental. Like that is where it was like, all right, disclosure. I have to make sure
mhm,
that I'm safe when it comes to it. So like navigating those spaces where it might be like a sex party and it's anonymous. Those are the things that it gets a little like kind of it gets weird where it's like the space is kind of shifted for me because of my status. Other than that, I'm doing everything and being nasty and being a freak as much as I can.
mhm.
I think that whatever suggestion we gonna do it. They said be a freak in the bed. Anyway, we ain't got time for that. But what we do got time for is I want to uplift my sister who passed away, Tiffany Morera, who made she expressed about a love contract. Also, it's called the disclosure contract. If those who haven't heard of it, again, look at your laws in your states, but make sure you write a contract explicitly writing down and taking back the power of your body. Because what is body autonomy when we're always getting prosecuted for it? I agree that I want him to eat my vagina. I agree that you are doing this. I want to do that. You have them sign this, and you have that as a contract, so that way they can never say that you never told them. You keep that, they keep a copy, but you have that for your safety, right? There's so many other tips, but we ain't got that much time. But that's a
Right.
really good one that I wanted to share. And you can look that up at the body because she posted that up before she passed away um, earlier this year or
Thank
last
you.
year.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you. Tess.
Well, I know we're at time, and I'm going to blow everyone's sex positivity out of the water right now because this is not something I talk about very often, and I'll do it as fast as I can.
Okay.
Because I started taking testosterone after being treated for pneumocystis pneumonia back in the early 90s. Since then, I've been on testosterone replacement therapy, TRT. It's a long time. It's 30 plus years. Um, One of the things they don't tell you about that, especially as long as I've been on it, is that after a while, things stop working. I mean, there's a little more pressure on my end than there is a female end, but I'm just saying I can't get it up. And yet I feel like I have intimacy and I have touch, and I think we could talk about that a lot. But as far as for such a long time, gay men, especially, where the whole idea was the goal was orgasm. And I've not been able to do that in years. But I passed through this sort of shame and the kind of who am I without this phase of it. It took a while. I kept it to myself, but I'm beginning to talk about it now because I think that I'm completely sex positive. I've had enough sex for everybody on this call um, in my years. But I do think it's important for us to say it's okay not to have sex, but to figure out how to recreate it so that there's intimacy involved in your life, not necessarily orgasm. And that's opening a can of worms right on time for the session to end. I apologize, but that's where it is for me, and that's my truth. So
Thank you, Tess. Thank you for your truth. Joyce, I don't think I need to ask you this question.
Well,
I, I,
there's I add.
because you said so much about sex positivity, you did. You touched on so many different points about sex and loving who you are and loving your body. Um, Kim talked
Well,
about sex doesn't stop at all.
you know that one of the things we don't talk about is self pleasure.
Yeah.
I didn't have the time. I didn't have the time,
I,
Dr. Joyce. We
I
didn't have
just
the
Yeah,
want
we
you
time.
to
don't have
let
time.
them know that it's
this is the
quite all
whole
right.
seminar in itself.
Yeah,
Go
we
ahead and
don't have time.
toys, go for it, enjoy it, no problem. But
Thank you.
I'm out.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joyce Keller Turner. And so Kim talked about sex doesn't stop at all, and you can be free. She can be free with her husband. And when she said that, what came to my mind? You equals you. Because it did. It freed a lot of us on loving who we are and wanting to be freer sexually. It helped a lot of us with feeling that comfort when we're having sex. And Tess, you talked about intimacy, but you can also satisfy your partner, you know? And,
Yeah,
and, and yeah, you could satisfy your partner. So, I want to say thank you to this very robust conversation that we have had. And now I will share with you guys some questions in the chat. And again, you guys, come on, put them questions in the chat and download the CHLP's legal primer. Do we have any questions here? Because I don't think I've seen any come across. Our healthcare system organizations typically don't want to talk about sex positivity. No, they don't. What does anyone think? Why does anyone think older folks don't have sex? I guess that's a question. If you want to answer it, because I don't see any more questions here. Why do you think? Why do you think that?
there's kind of an idea that necessarily being older, you kind of become invisible to the culture, and that sex just kind of goes with that. I mean, they just don't. I think some people may not want to think about it, but I'm joking. But I think it has to do with the invisibility many of us feel. They just don't even consider the idea that people over a certain age have sex. And what's sad and heartbreaking is that we live at a time when we can prevent HIV through PrEP and through U equals U, and yet we keep hearing these stories about adults who are seroconverting at over 50, who didn't get the messages because they weren't part of the
Mm,
target group, or because they thought HIV was over, or because it's a chronic manageable and it's just a pill, I hear people say. So I think
mm,
those things are kind of working against us in feeling more sexually empowered. So I want to talk to you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to answer that question?
I would, what I would say is, I think a lot of that goes back to our cultural upbringing, where after a certain age, and if you're no longer, if you're an older woman and you're single, then, especially if you go to church, you can't be knocking boots at night, because you're going to be seen differently by the community. So
Right.
that it's that cultural upbringing. It is that church teaching, and it's how we saw so many of our elderly people in the community live. I just happen to be not be one of them, and that's having grown up around beautiful women in my family who've always embraced their sexuality, even after they were older, and only thing they did was embolden me, and that I'm hoping to embolden another generation.
Yes,
And
yeah.
what I love is the fact that I'm able, at my age, to fill a room with a group of people and talk about PrEP. Tell them it's okay to get on PrEP. Tell them it's okay to use a condom. Tell them that
Absolutely.
if they, just happen to luck up and get lucky when they didn't think they were going to, get that morning after pill. I know it's not a morning after pill, but for them to get PrEP, and I talk about that because sometimes everything is not planned.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're older, you know, like with me, um, my partner's 49. So hey, I don't think he's not busy. So I'm just saying is that we need to erase those lines, those invisible lines. We need to erase those and let people know that it's okay to be in love, but to be knowledgeable and know what it takes to protect themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do that.
Someone says here, a pleasure and orgasms can be achieved without insertion. Intimacy and touch can create fantastic orgasm. And someone asked in the question, maybe we wanted to hear what Dr. Joyce Keller Turner had to say. And maybe you and Kim can just touch a little bit on pleasure and sexuality and HIV before we go. You can start first, Kim. You can start first, and then
Oh,
we'll have
okay.
choice.
So I remember being maybe like 15, because again, 15, 16, and me and I still do it because I teach kids from, when I say basic level of sexuality, and it might not be basic for like most people, but consent, good touch, bad touch, because it all starts with that, when it comes to teaching. And I remember doing a workshop where it was like find everyday items and use that as foreplay, right? Like as an activity, and touch yourself. Use that for yourself. Use that for your partner. See what feels good. I think it's this whole big misconception on one, not touching your body and feeling what feels good to you, and one is somebody else to tell you what feels good to them, or what make having somebody control what feels good versus you trying to figure that out for yourself. So for me, I'm a big advocate on, I'm caressing my nipples. I'm touching my ears. I'm touching my body. I want to know what the inside of my vagina feels like. I want to touch your body. I want you to tell me what feels good. I want you to touch it. I want us to put a mirror up and look at each other. Like those things that we don't do. We put so much shame on just our bodies and keeping it to ourselves that we're sharing it and we're not talking about it. And then they get confused or surprised when we come up because we're not getting that education, because we're not opening ourselves up, we're not opening our minds, and then they get mad that people are coming in and testing positive, whether that's HIV or whether that's syphilis or gonorrhea, but nobody's giving that information, even in the younger ages. Like nobody's talking to their children.
Right.
Like I got a bag of condoms for my 14-year-old son that's chilling in here. I had to move out of the frame because it was blocking the way, but because I'm not stupid. Like I know that my kid, he's getting his dick licked, okay, and he's doing other stuff, and I make it possible for him to know that this is how you do it, but this is how you do it safely. Also, let him know you a black young man growing up here. So you have to carry yourself different, but you also have to know your rights as well. And I think that's something that we don't talk about. Like, figure out before you tell somebody else what feels good for you. And again, I know Dr. Joyce was about to talk about self pleasure, and you gonna go in, and I want you to go in, but that's something that we don't promote. Mutual
Right.
masturbation, actual using sex toys, and how that can be pleasurable, and just knowing. I didn't even know that I'm gonna stop, but not knowing that you couldn't bring certain amount of sex toys to certain areas of like different states. Like, there's a cap where you can't bring. Well, first off, like, why is somebody? Well, I can't talk for me. I do demonstrations, but like more than 10 dildos in my bag, I will get pulled over by TSA. They will confiscate that. Like, if I'm going to Texas, I can't have more than six. So like, just understanding again. Why do I know that? I had to look it up. But like, just knowing what your rights are when it comes to everything and what laws is going on in different states. I'm gonna stop there. Go. Go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Joyce,
Yeah.
thank
But
you.
when I talk about having your own toys, number one, they don't cheat on you unless you know. I'm just saying. Uh, other thing is that a lot of time women are divorced or they're single, and like with me, I'm still menopausal. So Kim, I understand what you're saying, and my sex level is still really high. So in case I'm by myself, I need what I need, and I'm not embarrassed about that. And in fact, I even told my son, I said, baby, when your mama dies, if it's before you, get to my nightstand. Please, if you don't want anybody to be shocked, clear out the drawer. But we have that kind of conversation. We need to get rid of the taboo. After I had my children, thank God for the freedom. When my menstrual cycle stopped, I began to shout. Because now I ain't got to wait. I can do it whenever I want, the way I want it, and I enjoy it. And we need to be honest about us being older women. Yes, I'm an older woman, but I am still beautiful. I am still sexy, and I'm still desirable. As my friend told me, he said, Joyce, you still got it, and I still want it. I said, praise the Lord. So I'm just saying, I know I make light of a lot of things, but sexual health is if you are physically well, mentally well, and you have a positive outcome about who you are, how you feel, you know, all that is what makes you well. What keeps me well and hopeful and thriving is the fact that I do have a sexual life. And yes, I know that people are saying, oh, she's in the ministry. Yes, I am. But God created sex and he didn't tell me I had to
Come
stop
on
doing,
now.
you know, hey, just because he gave me the spirit, I'm
Absolutely.
to take my sexuality. So, if any preacher out there is upset, we already know what time it is. So we ain't going there. So I'm just saying you can judge me if you choose to, but my life is my life. And I don't allow anybody to define me by my age. I'm still a
Mhm.
vital I am a virile woman. So just deal with it. And like I said, when I say talk about buying sex toys, why not? You go out, you put all these apps on your phone, do whatever else you need to do. Have your
Mm.
apps in your drawer. Do what you need.
Amazon got them for sale.
So,
I buy my sex toys from Amazon. As my son walks in, get back.
honey, have you?
As my son walks in, please back up.
Well, let me.
Thank you.
That, that Nasty Gal runs a sale, and then there's Guilt. Guilt runs a sale. They don't just sell shoes and clothes and jewelry
Right, right.
out there. And I'll order mine from Guilt because that way I don't, because Nasty Girl has a tendency to put that on their box. I don't be wanting everybody to know, but I mean, that's private for me, so I don't buy them from Nasty Gal anymore. But Guilt still could say
Oh goodness.
Adam
Thank
and
you.
Eve is
Thank
actually they discreet
you.
too.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We talked about toys, masturbation, touch, feeling, being physically and mentally well. And sex is still alive when you're still physically and mentally well. There's no way it's not still alive. We talked about menstruals and being able now to have even more sex because you're not on your menstrual. And I can go like this to you on that one, Joyce, because my menstrual stopped about 10 years ago. So I truly understand that part. We're going to go ahead and we're going to close. I thank all of you so much. This is a great discussion, a really great discussion. Thank you so much for being so transparent, about your life. Because sometimes a lot of people don't know unless we tell them. And someone else may be going through the same thing. So I appreciate you guys being so transparent here today. Everybody, again, hit that link in the chat and download CHLP's amazing legal primer. And we're going to close today. You guys have an awesome and amazing day. Bye-bye.